betting season is in full force right now, which means you need a sportsbook with integrity and longevity like BetUS. BetUS has been pioneers in the sportsbook industry for nearly 3 decades, thriving and paying you, the loyal customer. What's great about BetUS is they have loads of bonuses. So join now at betus.com today and receive a 125% sign up bonus by using code Chicago125. BetUS has all your NFL games with team and player props and loads of NFL futures and odds. BetUS gives you plenty of options in addition to the NFL. You can bet on PGA golf, UFC matches, the NBA, and more. They have every bet type imaginable, and the BetUS mobile platform is easy to use with full betting options. Follow my lead and get your phone, online, and social sports betting partner with integrity and longevity like BetUS. You can use the bonus code Chicago125, and remember, that bonus code gets you a 125% sign up bonus. BetUS. You bet, you win, you get paid. BetUS. What's going on, Bears fans? And welcome to another episode of the Chicago Audible Podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Moreano, and I'm joined by Santa Claus. Actually, it's Mason West. So, Mason, you're all festive, dressed in the whole Santa getup. How have you been?
I've been good. I worked Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday this week. Every day I had a different outfit. Tuesday was pajama. Wednesday was a weird, ugly Christmas sweater jorts look. That was a good one. And then today I dressed as Santa and played on the golf simulator. So, that's always fun to see that. Looked ridiculous, played terribly, but overall feeling pretty good.
That's good. Festive as people who are watching can see, but I kind of would like to have seen, Santa like on the golf simulator. I think that would be a pretty cool and funny, little video there. But I'm glad that you're having a good time and bringing the holiday spirit, because we kind of need it with the Bears being at 4-10, and this is our first time talking since they lost on the Monday night game. So, Mason, before actually we kind of talk about this Bears Seahawks game, what are just some quick initial thoughts after the Monday night loss to the Vikings?
So the thing that stood out the most to me in that game was actually the area of the defense that I thought was just going to get demolished due to injuries and COVID and all that stuff, which is the Bears secondary, actually held its own. And the pass rush showed up again. And the defense actually wasn't bad. Besides, there's that one touchdown that Deion Bush gave up, first touchdown of the game, to Justin Jefferson. The technique wasn't great on that one. Definitely, just stopped moving his feet, got turned around. Was a good route, wasn't the greatest route in the world. But after that, the defense really solidified a bit, and they gave their team a chance to win, right? I mean, if the offense had done anything, they actually could have been in that game. And the question ends up being, was it really the Bears that kept them in the game, or is it kind of the Vikings and Kirk Cousins doing what they tend to do in Bears-Vikings games, which is not play to their best? But Thomas Graham really showed up. I mean, he had a pretty fantastic stat line overall when you really look, especially for a rookie who wasn't apparently, maybe not good enough to see the field, but wasn't, according to the Bears coaches, ready to see the field. He had a 90.7 PFF grade, if whatever that does for you. 3 pass breakups, up 1 passing stop, and 10 yards allowed, 0 first downs. I mean, that's a pretty good day for a rookie who spent most of his season on the practice squad. The argument can be made, was that a bad thing, or did he actually get some time developing on the practice squad? You can really go either way. That's up to you as an individual to decide. And then you got to go to the offense, which just looked the same, right? The moment that I stopped watching the game because I was like, I need to wake up early. I don't need this anymore in my life, was the Bears got that block punt. They went 4 and out, and you had Darnell Mooney in the backfield, I believe, didn't even know where he was supposed to be. Fake handoff that wasn't to anybody, poor route combinations, poor line play. It was just a bad design play as a whole. And I was like, we're done. And then, of course, there's the Tevin Jenkins, right? The standing up for his quarterback incident heard around the world. Jermaine Ifedi getting in his face, which I think that's just garbage, honestly. Jermaine Ifedi, what have you done all year long? I mean, either you weren't playing well or you were hurt. Who do you have the right to get up in Tevin's face and stand up for Justin, which almost no one's done all year? I mean, how often do we ever really see an offensive lineman run over and help out whether it's their quarterback, whether it's their running back, whether it's receiver, like get up after a play. It just doesn't happen all that often. So it was like overall just a frustrating game, um, and just doesn't give you a lot to analyze or build on because the things that need the most work are the things that didn't really occur.
Yeah, that's I mean, it's a good little wrap up of what this game was. On the play where Jenkins gets the personal foul for, standing up for Justin Fields, the biggest problem I had with it is more so not with Jenkins and how he retaliated and standing up for his quarterback, but I think it's just with Justin Fields and being in that situation in the first place. I think what we kind of saw in that game Monday night is that he wants to try to look for plays that maybe are not there. And that's because maybe a play design, the situation, the defense, all these different factors. But he just kept getting closer and closer to that sideline. And it's like, what are you going to try to realistically do at that point? And then you throw the ball, a little late. And I think the hit technically is in bounds, but you're putting yourself in a bad situation. So that's where I had my I guess that's where I was most disappointed. Not, I don't know if disappointed is even the right word, but that's where my grief was with the play. But hey, I liked how Tevin Jenkins reacted. I just think back to week 3 against Cleveland, and there's so many still images and plays that you can see. Hey, Fields is on the ground, lying there, and after the lineman let whatever pass rusher, Myles Garrett, Clowney, whoever it was, hit him and be on the ground, they even help him back up. So I like that, and you really go back and watch Tevin Jenkins throughout the entirety of the game. Outside of those penalties, I mean, I think he had a really good debut for his first starting role at that left tackle position. So I liked what I saw from him in terms of strengths, run blocking, pass blocking, and hopefully just builds off of that and just eliminates those penalties. But that game is obviously in the past now. Now the Bears are looking to potentially get their 5th win of the season against a team that only has 5 wins in the Seattle Seahawks right now. But before we do that, just a quick update on the Bears news this week. Not much has happened. I think the biggest thing that we're going to have to keep monitoring throughout the week and for the rest of the season is the reserve/COVID-19 list. Who's on it and who's off of it, and how that kind of goes throughout the week. And today it was announced just a little bit a while ago that Akeem Hicks, who had just been battling through, lower body injuries, is now on the reserve/COVID-19 list. And, after the game he had against Minnesota, that's unfortunate to see. Jesper Horsted, who had the 1 touchdown for the Bears in that game against the Vikings, he's on the COVID-19 reserve list. Robinson is still on it, and so is Jalen Johnson. But the Bears do get Andy Dalton and Mario Edwards back. Chris Tabor is also back at Hallis Hall, and Bill Lazor is also back with them. So it's going to be really, I think, just those COVID-19 lists, just seeing who's on it, who's off, and that's what we'll have to keep monitoring here, Mason. When you saw that Akeem was on it, what's kind of going through your head?
There's 2 phases that kind of went through my head. Phase number 1 was just a general disappointment because he came back and you saw the impact he has, and it reminds you of, the previous years, 2018, 2019. He had 2 sacks and 4 quarterback hits in only 53% of the snaps that was played. Like that's pretty fantastic. And you also saw how impactful he was just in that run game. Dalvin Cook definitely didn't have a solid day overall, but most of the longer gains he had occurred when Hicks was on the sideline. And so that was a really good contrast there. And, if I had to bet an amount of money, that would be painful, like something that I really was like, I need to get this answer right. In terms of whether Akeem's going to be back or not next year, I would put it on no. And just because of the contract, because of his age, things like that. And it stinks because now you're just robbing us of the little bit of Akeem Hicks time that we have left. Because, if there's someone that defined being both a Chicago Bear and the closest thing you have to a human version of a literal bear, it's Akeem Hicks. And to miss out on that, it sucks. It just straight up does. I wish they were able to bring him back. I just don't see it happening.
No, I definitely don't see it happening either. Just, even in last Monday night's loss, just, there were times where he was waving to the fans. I think he knows it too. He's had some pretty emotional press conferences in the past month or so, kind of recognizing what his situation is, his contract status, and what the team kind of thinks of him and values him in terms of a player. Obviously, I think they would like to have him back, but I think it's just going to come down to money and what, ultimately is best for the Bears, how they like to put it, right? So, yeah, I think this is definitely his last hurrah. And, to potentially rob him of one game because of the COVID is unfortunate. Then you have possibly 2 games, the Giants and then Minnesota Vikings again, for what is realistically going to be Akeem Hicks's last games in a Bears uniform, which is definitely sad to see for sure. But Mason, I think before we kind of get into this Bears Seahawks discussion, I have to tell you about the Knuckleheads podcast. It's hosted by former NBA players Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles. The guys bring some of the best NBA players, past and present, to have a completely unguarded conversation about sports, culture, and basketball nostalgia. The guests for this season include Kevin Durant, Jason Tatum, Sue Bird, and the Chicago Bulls star guard DeMar DeRozan. Listening to Quentin Richardson and Darius Miles do their thing is like playing NBA 2K with no fouls. So make sure to check out the Knuckleheads podcast wherever you listen to your podcasts. And now this is the Chicago Audible podcast. I'm your host, Nicholas Moreano, joined by Mason West, and we're going to preview this Week 16 matchup between the 4-10 Chicago Bears and the 5-9 Seattle Seahawks. And Mason, I think if I were to ask you this question, what's your initial perception of the Seahawks prior to this year? I think it would be a completely different answer than the one you're about to give me now. But when you think of the Seattle Seahawks right now, just what is that initial perception?
Well, it's like the schedule first came out, right? And we saw that this game was on the docket, or even before we officially knew when it was happening. I know that we had circled it as a game like, oh, we really have to try to go to this game and do a live podcast, something like that. Because, we were still had some high hopes for the Bears. And then with Seattle, they've just perennially been a team that's at least in it, if not a contender. And they have exciting players, and there was even that, obviously the Russell Wilson saga, where he was in theory a Bear. It got to the point where it was like, oh man, like this is really happening. And, the rumor is that it got shut down by Pete Carroll. So there's this almost animosity where where I thought, hey, let's go out there, beat the Seahawks, show them that we don't care about all that. And they have other exciting players. DK Metcalf is a beast, right? I mean, and Tyler Lockett, really a solid receiver. The defense, while it's not what it was by any stretch of the imagination, Legion of Boom, at the beginning or before the year, there was always thinking, okay, it's going to be pretty solid. I mean, we've seen that's not really the case now, and everything's almost falling apart. The defense isn't what you thought it would be. Russell got hurt in that finger injury, and I kept telling people on Twitter, this is going to be a much bigger deal than people think it's going to be in terms of him zipping the ball. And, oh, no, it's a finger. Like, no, it's an important finger. And even since he's been back and starting to maybe get back in the groove of things, DK Metcalf hasn't really been what you want him to be. My fantasy team can tell you that. It's been Tyler Lockett had COVID last week. They had Chris Carson got hurt. The running game has been super off, which when we get to talking about their offense a little more specifically, I think that lack of a running game is really hurting Russell Wilson. It's literally a tale of, 2 different stories in terms of what we thought the Seahawks were going to be and ultimately what they were.
That's a great job of kind of wrapping up what this Seattle Seahawks team is. It's not one where this is going to be Russell Wilson's first losing season with the team. And you just don't associate the Seahawks with mediocrity or less than that because of their quarterback and because of the culture they've established and how competitive they've been the past, past couple of years. So it is different seeing this team. And I just kind of going into this one like you, Mason, and there may be a chance I might be at this game flying to Seattle. So we'll see what happens, but it's definitely not going to be the game that I was anticipating, going into this season. And this is one that I circled, early on because we all knew that Justin Fields looks up to Russell Wilson. So you're kind of circling that matchup, the quarterback matchup, just to see how they would both play at this point. And, it's definitely these 2 offenses are not where they want to be. That's for sure. So we'll kind of start off with that and start with our our discussion with this Bears offense, Mason, I think with 3 games remaining, right? There obviously I don't know how much can be shown in terms of growth, but for you, if you had to boil it down to maybe 3 points on what you would like to see offensively, maybe in this game, but also continuing on, is there anything that kind of stands out? Because I know we say a lot of these things during this segment of the show. Then when it comes to game time, well, it just never ends up happening. But is there anything that kind of stands out right now for you?
It's all about the development and usage of the young to middle of the road guys, the ones who are either playing for a contract or are definitely going to be here for a decent amount of time. So I know when we're going to get out of Dave Montgomery for the most part, if he's got good enough blocking and if he's actually used appropriately. What I don't know is, can Khalil Herbert and Dave Montgomery coexist, right? Because it seems like it's one or the other. Montgomery got hurt, Herbert came in, he did really, really well. And then when Montgomery came back, Herbert was forgotten, which is a shame. I mean, he should still, despite he had 0 carries in that last game in the Vikings, even though he was on the field for 17 snaps. And I would expect there to be more receiving options when it comes to for the entire backfield. I mean, Montgomery had 5 catches, but it was only for 23 yards. So it's like, one point, can Herbert and Montgomery operate without having to force the Wildcat out there? 2, can Darnell Mooney be at least a 1B, if not, or is he truly just a 2? Because while there's some stats floating around out there about how he's one of the top in the league in terms of being able to get open, that hasn't shown on the field. There's been a lot of drops. There's been issues where, and this could be on Justin too, he's been overthrown, or that he hasn't been able to get yards after the catch. So can Mooney be a 7-8 reception guy when they have to lean on him? And then lastly, just let's say A-Rob's gone, and you're saying Montgomery's number 1, and if we're saying Mooney's number 2, ignoring any other free agents that come in, who currently on this team would be that third to go-to option? And unfortunately, like you said, I was really prepared to start having the horse at hype conversation in place of Will being here, but because he's had 3 targets, 2 of which have been touchdowns. Like, what else does he have to do to just get some run? Like, because it's not like you're getting anything out of Jimmy Graham. Cole Kmet's been doing okay. And that small sidebar on the Cole Kmet conversation, if he was on like almost any other team and expectations were a little lower, people would love him. They'd be raving about how, he should get more looks and all this stuff. He's just, because of where he was drafted, because of how much emphasis has been put on the tight end by the city of Chicago and also by Nagy and the Bears, there's these lofty expectations where people are saying, ceiling of Kelsey, floor of Kyle Rudolph. He's doing okay. Is he what I want him to be? No, but like, let's not go crazy. It's not like he's a 4-year vet and we're ready to give up on him and we're talking about what is this 5th-year option going to look like. Like, that's a whole thing. So who's the third option right now that you can really go to, that you can trust to make you to get you a play?
I like that, Mason, and I'm going to actually build off of that with Cole Kmet, because I think for him, that's someone that I definitely want to continue watching, and obviously for these last 3 games, but just to see how the Bears kind of utilize him. I asked him in yesterday's press conference, like, he had a nice connection with Justin Fields over the middle of the field, that seam route. Nice one. It was, the timing was right. Obviously, the ball placement was good, and then Kmet was able to make the catch. And I asked him if he would like to see more of those types of plays, just to, I mean, why not at this point, right? You're not making the playoffs, are out of the question. You've been mathematically eliminated. Why not try to use a guy that is going to be here for next season? And he kind of said, like, yeah, if those opportunities presents itself. He said it was cool that they had connected on that type of play, something that they've been repping all off season. And he's had other seam routes earlier this season too, but that's definitely a guy I want to see become more utilized in this offense, because I don't think at this point right now, at this juncture, like, anybody making a designation on what Cole Kmet is or isn't, I don't think that's right. Because one, you look at his rookie season, Mason, this is a guy that came into the NFL without having a traditional offseason. COVID impacted all of that. Then you come into year 2, like, everything is screwed up with this offense, right? Like, even Allen Robinson, who had been consistent all those years prior with Mitchell Trubisky, with fluctuating quarterbacks, with the Bears, and just in Nagy's offense, was doing great things. And you look at this year, he's even off. So I don't think it's even fair to Cole Kmet. And I know, like, obviously draft stats is going to dictate how people think of what he's doing right now, but let's kind of wait and see with him. Okay. And I get it. You want to see more production. And I definitely think he's capable of that. And he does need to make some of those catches in the end zone. He's had some opportunities, hasn't come away with them, but I don't think it's safe or it's fair to make a bold claim right now. And Mason, I don't know if you've been seeing this, and sometimes in our chat we get like, "Hey, Justin Fields is a bust." It's like, come on, man! Like, how are you going to make that claim right here, right now in Nagy's offense? Like, you just can't. It's just like, I don't know. Maybe you have an agenda that you're trying to make happen and put that out into the world, but to me that's just crazy talk.
No, I mean, I couldn't agree with you more. I've said this, I think I tweeted out even, if you try to use a hammer like a screwdriver, you're going to say this hammer is absolutely useless. And that's the thing. I mean, he just isn't being used in the proper way by any stretch of the imagination. And even if you compare him to other rookie quarterbacks like Zach Wilson and Trevor Lawrence, they're not doing very well because their offenses are also broken. The only rookie that's succeeding is Mac Jones. And you have Bill Belichick, one of the greatest coaches of all time, Josh McDaniels, and potential future Bears head coach, who's one of the greater, if not greatest, offensive coordinators in a long while, leading the charge there. And you literally could see and watch the evolution of their offense as they gave him a little more each time. And go back to training camp, him and Cam Newton were both battling to be number one. It wasn't just handed to Cam and said, Mac just sit on the back burner. So it was such a different way that was brought along. And that isn't to say Justin has stuff to work on, right? The ball security needs to be better. It is bad. Sometimes, yes, the defense makes a good play, puts a helmet on the ball, and you lose it. But as you said earlier, there are times where he tries to extend a play, get a little too much, get a yard or two extra that he doesn't really need. Like if it's first or second down, you can slide a little easier, earlier. You can dip out of bounds a little sooner. But yes, if it's 3rd and 1, 3rd and 2, and you lose the ball trying to get that last yard to continue the drive, it just has it's different. And the interceptions too, some of them are on him, some are luck based, right? We've seen a couple that have popped off some receivers' hands, and things of that nature. Some have just been good plays by the defense. The jump pass, while swaggy, didn't work out. That needs to be retired as of right now until he gets a little more experience under his belt. So, as you said, literally not enough data to make a claim. We live in this instant gratification world. Let's pump the brakes. Let's get him in a real offense with a full offseason as QB1 with a offensive coordinator, with a head coach that don't suck.
I think, yeah, that will be a start there, Mason. And you know what they can actually do even at the end of these last 3 games? He talked about what his strengths are. 1, moving outside the pocket and running that high up-tempo offense. And no, you can't do that every single play, every single series, but you can use it sparingly within the entirety of a game. So let's see that happen. Put him in a space that's comfortable for him to where he knows the offense. He said that the high tempo offense is good for him because he doesn't have to really think as much. You just go out there and react and play. Let's do that. Let's see the Bears actually put him in those positions and let him make plays out there. And like you said, he needs to take care of the football, but if you put him in those situations where he's comfortable, I think you're going to see more productivity out of this offense and maybe some points in the last 3 games because look, these guys are still competitors and we'll see which ones still have that pride left, knowing that the playoffs are out of the question, but that can be a start, Mason, even if it's not going to amount to, obviously moving on. It's just going to be these last 3 games, but you could see progress in that area, small increments. And that's what I think you need to kind of do with what is not a wasted season. And when you look at it collectively, you can almost make the claim that is what it is, but you could still improve in certain areas. And it's going to take bit by bit, that small progression, and put him in the right position could definitely help him do that.
One quick thing,
Mason,
it just came across, the injury report was released for the Bears today. So since we're talking about Justin, it's probably important to note that he actually did not participate in practice today.
Yeah, I saw that today. He was in. I don't know why I didn't mention that in the beginning. He was in his hoodie. It was Andy Dalton and Nick Foles taking the practice reps, and just he was out there, and nobody was in pads, but he was out there in his hoodie, kind of just surveying and watching, and you know, that will also determine if I go to Seattle this weekend. If he is not playing, I will be watching at home just like everybody else because I do not want to. And I told you the schedule, Mason, of what I might have to do. I would have to fly to
Oh, that's
Dallas,
crazy.
sleep in the Dallas airport, then fly out in the morning from Dallas to Seattle, and then cover the game, and then basically sleep in the Seattle airport, and then come back home on Monday after the game back in Chicago. I'm not doing that if Justin Fields isn't playing. I'm sorry. I'm just not going to do that. But is there anybody else on the list, Mason, or anything else worthy to note on that
Um,
injury report?
there weren't like really any significant updates when it came to it. You still had Jakeem Grant, and you still had who was that? David Crawford out with concussions. Jason Peters still also didn't participate. You had Marquise Goodwin go from limited to full today, and then everyone else was full. That was full before. So really, just Justin and then Marquise Goodwin were the only shifts.
Gotcha. Okay. I mean, and those are key ones. Getting another receiver back, but also really it's Justin Fields that we need to worry about in this one. Mason, with anything else with this Bears offense that you want to talk about, whether it is from that Minnesota Vikings game or just in general with this Bears offense.
So I definitely don't want to be that person who's worried about the 52nd and 53rd person on the roster because most of the time those players don't make significant differences. They're on the practice squad for a reason. They get cut for a reason. But I'm definitely at the point where I'm disappointed that, for example, Daz Newsome A wasn't used very much, and B didn't really seem like during his 48 snaps even like he really knew where he was supposed to be. And for me, when you add up the breadcrumbs of how often the Bears don't develop receivers for sure, and they don't really develop a lot of positions besides maybe D linemen, and that's even that can be argued. So what is Daz Newsome been doing, or what have the coaches been doing with Daz Newsome while he's been on the practice squad? That when he does get a shot, he looks as out of sorts as he did. That when Adams finally gets a chance a couple weeks ago, he got one route, one drop, and then that's the end of what we heard of him. Again, we are in this development, playing essentially for next year, seeing what you have zone. Those are two examples of individuals that you, in theory, want to see what we have in this, so that we can plan for next year. And it just seems like that the Bears just continue to not know what the heck they're doing.
That's definitely a part of it. And I'm so glad that you brought up Daz Newsome because for the media today, there was three media members, including it was myself, Mark Potash from Sun Times, Deion Miller that actually was at practice. I don't blame anybody for not being there. We're literally there for 10 total minutes, get to record for 3 of those 10 minutes. But what we did kind of show, what we saw was like the wide receivers doing warm-ups and doing just some pass catching drills, some footwork and stuff like that. And they're the closest to the reporters. But you mentioned Daz Newsome not knowing where the heck he needs to be at on the field. He was off sides, right, of one of the plays that he was in there in the Minnesota Vikings game. But also just doing a routine catching drill where you turn around, there's a coach on one side, you catch the ball, throw it back, turn around, catch the ball on the other side, there's another coach throwing the ball. Why did Daz Newsome twice mess up that drill on 2 different reps after seeing Darnell Mooney go first, Demir Bird go second, and then one of the coaches like, Daz, what are you doing? So although coaching can definitely be a part of that, it's like the player themselves needs to be accountable for what they're seeing in front of them. And you have two guys that are repping it in front of you. You need to know when to turn, when to throw the ball back, and just even in a routine drill. But you could see how something from practice and not keying in on what's going on also can translate to game day, right? We saw that. I don't know. I don't remember the last time I heard a wide receiver that lined up off sides, Like, it just doesn't happen very often, right? You just look where the ball's at, you signal to the line coach, and you're usually good. So it was small. I noted it down, and I would have just forgotten about it had you not even mentioned Daz Newsome. But little things. It's the little details, and the Bears, a lot of times don't get the little details right. So maybe it's obviously starts in practice, and can carry over to a game. But I'm really glad you mentioned that, Mason. Actually, before we kind of end the discussion on the Bears offense, is there anything about this Seahawks defense that worries you, or just something to be cognizant of with this Bears offense for this Sunday matchup?
So I said at the beginning, the defense isn't as good as I think a lot of people thought it was going to be, but it's still solid. Like, it ranks number 2 in opponent points per play at 0.282, number 7th in third down conversion percentage at 36.81%, which we know the Bears struggle in. So that's not exactly a great combination. They're also 5th in opponent red zone scoring percentage in terms of touchdowns at 49.02%. So this isn't going to be a cakewalk. I mean, you look at their record and it's not good. But it's more so, and we're going to talk about this when we flip to the other side of the ball. I think it's more their offense and lack of production than is their defense. Their defense is good enough to win you games, but they can't score right now. Is how they have it set up. So if you're expecting the Bears to go out there and all of a sudden, for Justin to have this, renaissance kind of a game, even like a Steelers-esque game, I don't know that that's going to happen. He's going to have to work for it. It's not just going to be given to him or to the Bears offense as a whole.
No doubt. And if you don't have a guy like Cooper Kupp on your offense, which the Bears do not, then it's going to be a lot more difficult. I actually watched the game for the first time because they didn't televise it over here, the Seahawks-Rams game. So I had to watch it just on Game Pass. And man, what I would have done to just draft Cooper Kupp on my fantasy team, I would still be in the playoffs. But instead, I had to rely on Odell Beckham. And I saw what he had his one catch in the game. I was like, that's all I could get. And I was down by 10. I couldn't get that. And the person I played, a good friend of mine, he had Allen Robinson, who was out with COVID. And he also had Adam Thielen, who didn't play, in his lineup. And I still it drives me nuts. I can't even talk about this anymore because fantasy – whatever. Wait, how are you doing good based in fantasy? Are you in all? I know you're in like 12 different leagues, but how'd you do overall? Are you in playoffs for some of them? How's that going?
So I really try when I draft my leagues to draft a lot of the same players for the most part. So, but there's one in particular. It's a family league that just means a little bit more to me just because we have a trophy. It's a whole thing, and it's more about bragging rights. My roster included players like Austin Eckler, Najee Harris, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase. And most of those people had awful days. I got crushed. How are you supposed to win when Jamar Chase gets you 0.8 points? When Najee Harris gets you 3.6? It was, I was in that. I had Taysom Hill as my quarterback just because my quarterbacks have been a mess. And he got me nine whole whopping points. So, no, I lost that game. I am out of the playoffs in every one of my leagues now. And so I'm just enjoying football for the sake of enjoying football.
Yeah, I'm in the same boat. I didn't make any of mine, and I had Tom Brady, so that went perfect for Tom Brady and Gronk in mine. So that's how I ended up losing my league. But Mason, we're gonna go to the defensive portion of this podcast. But before we do, I have to tell you about our partnership with Owen. If you're like Mason and myself, we like to work out and stay active. And after a great workout, it's important to give your body the amino acids it needs to repair and rebuild proteins. And that's why we drink Owen, which stands for only what you need. All of Owen's products are plant-based, free of artificial ingredients, and are allergen-friendly. Plus, Owen uses high-quality and carefully selected ingredients to make all of its products easily digestible. Like their Pro Elite Chocolate High Protein Shake, tastes delicious, and it has 35 grams of protein. And we first heard about Owen from Chicago Bears quarterback Justin Fields, who does follow a plant-based diet. You can get 20% off your first purchase with code TCA20 at liveowen.com. That's OWYN.com. That's 20% off your first purchase at liveowen.com. And remember to use that code TCA20. Obviously, Christmas is in a couple days. Could be a great Christmas gift. So check out liveowen.com and use the code TCA20. But join myself, Mason, and Justin Fields and try Owen only what you need. This is the Chicago Audible Podcast. I am Nicholas Moreano, and I'm joined alongside by Mason West. Actually, Santa, if you look in the lower third there. And we're talking about this Bears Seahawks matchup, and we're going to talk about the Bears defense. And you actually, highlighted at the top of the show, Mason, this Bears defense and that secondary last week against Minnesota. You have Justin Jefferson. Yeah, Kirk Cousins, who was having a pretty good season. Justin Jefferson has a little over 40 yards. Kirk Cousins held under 90 passing yards without their starting secondary. That's a pretty impressive, mark to set. And you had guys like Thomas Graham Jr., like you talked about earlier, have an absolute career day for first career start. Someone who was on the practice squad, like you mentioned, all year, gets that first start and makes the most of it. But that was really impressive as I was just watching, from Soldier Field, like, I'm kind of expecting, and Justin Jefferson was on my fantasy team, just like, yours, Mason, and you're expecting like, oh, I got this game one in the bag, and it never ended up happening outside the one touchdown. So where I want to take this discussion, Mason, because the Seahawks do have some playmakers at wide receiver, and maybe, I don't know if Tyler Lockett's going to be available. He was on COVID last week. I had to send him in fantasy. Everything comes back. I need to stop talking about fantasy. Done with it. But they do have DK Metcalf. And you still have Russell Wilson. They're just not having the season that we're used to seeing. Now, if the Bears don't get Jalen Johnson back, if they're still, we have to see what the safety situation is going to look like. How confident are you in this group maybe replicating what they did last Monday night against the Vikings? Or how confident are you feeling about this Bears defense right now?
Man, that's a good question. Because like we also said, the Seattle Seahawks are just struggling. If you want a look into why, Brett Coleman has a very good video out right now. It came out, I think, 2 weeks ago, that really discusses what has kind of happened to their offense. And one of the biggest takeaways I had when I listened to that and when I watched their game against the Rams, like you did, is they need the run game to really boost the pass game. And when you lose a back like Chris Carson, and your backups are Alex Collins, Rashad Penny, etc., Adrian Peterson on the practice squad, things like that, it's hard to get into what they want to do. And it doesn't, I mean, yes, Tyler Lockett and DK Metcalf are extremely talented individuals, right? I mean, DK Metcalf is a physical freak. Tyler Lockett, he just always seems to get open. But they're the most dangerous on those deep pass plays. It's those long bombs to DK and to Lockett that really is what opens up and creates some of that the scoring. And they haven't been able to do that because they haven't had that run game I just talked about. Specifically with DK, if you look at his last 4 games, 6 receptions, 4 receptions, 5 receptions, 1 reception. And in terms of yards, 52 yards, 43 yards, 60 yards, and 13 yards. There just aren't the long ball. That's not there right now. So if the Bears secondary can do what they did against the Vikings, if the pass rush can be there, let's say unfortunately you do not have Akeem Hicks, which is big for that. But if Robert Quinn can keep doing what he's doing, and if you don't have 2 major penalties on Tease Tabor and Deion Bush that are still, I don't understand those still. I mean, we could talk about that for probably an hour. You have a really solid chance to actually slow down this Seattle offense, which is sputtering.
It definitely is sputtering. And you look at Russell Wilson's stats from last Sunday's game, or Tuesday's game. Sorry. It's such a weird day to say the game was being played on, but 17 of 31, 156 yards and an interception. That was Russell Wilson's stat line, which is crazy. And you know why I think the Bears, look, I'm not going to say they're going to go out and do a very similar performance that the Rams can do, but they're in a position to be successful because you look at how still the Rams are they play that 2 deep safety look, and they like to keep everything in front of them. And, I think Sean Desai, I Obviously, Brandon Staley's not there, but you've adopted similar strategies, still keeping what the Rams do the best, and we saw that when Staley was there. So, what I think this Bears defense can do is try to replicate what the Rams are kind of doing in terms of keeping the safeties deep and have this Seattle Seahawks offense that likes to, predicate its offense on these big plays, make them work. Those short passes, dink and dunk down the field. That's what the Bears are going to want. That's what Seattle's not going to want to do. But if you kind of force their hand to do that, and you have to have good coverage, you have to have that pass rush. That's a how you can replicate success for this defense. And I think the Bears, in that Minnesota Vikings game, there weren't explosive plays that they gave up. Really, it was maybe the Justin Jefferson play was one of the deeper passes, the touchdown on the corner route, and there were a couple others, but nothing really alarmingly deep in terms of explosive. But if the Bears can bring that to this game, hey, you put yourself in a shot, right? At least to kind of contain this offense that, like you said, Mason, many times already, it has been struggling. And whether it's Russell Wilson, there's all the time you see him escape the pocket, turn around, and, find a spot to actually throw the ball. We've been so accustomed to seeing those plays completed for big plays down the field. And this year, for whatever reason it is, those are not happening as frequently. And that's why they're not really having that season or having it as offensive success that they have in years past. So I think the Bears are capable of doing that, especially if you get a Jalen Johnson back. And yes, you'll be without Akeem Hicks, but you have Robert Quinn, who's, a sack and a half away from tying Richard, and that sounds like a weird phrase to say, Richard Dent's record. And I think he's going to, at this point, 3 games left, I'm kind of already booking that Robert Quinn's going to break it just because of how he's been playing and being very familiar with, playing against a Russell Wilson. I think he kind of, not that he can know his tendencies because it's so sporadic at times when he's back there, but I think Robert Quinn has even a shot to tie it in this game against the Seahawks. So, yeah, I think there's opportunities for success in this game with this Bears defense. Mason, is there anything else about the Seattle Seahawks offense or even the Bears defense in general that you still kind of want to highlight here?
It's similar to the offense. I mean, it's just that time of year where when you're not in it, you just want to see either something like Robert Quinn break the sack record would be really cool, or you want to see that development. So hopefully Thomas Graham continues to get to play, to be allowed to play. Hopefully you can see. And so looking ahead, right, the Bears do not have a lot of draft picks, and they're going to, whoever is GM is going to have to be smart about spending in free agency. So I say all that because you need people who currently are on the roster or people you can get for an affordable price to plug some of the holes, right? Because it's not a 1-year turnaround. So I liked what I saw from Alec Ogletree in this last game. I mean, he definitely hasn't played like almost every snap consistently, but he did on Monday night, and he ended up with 8 tackles, 1 for a loss, and a QB hit, and was pretty solid in coverage on one incomplete pass on 3rd down in particular. It's nice to see that because you could, in theory, bring him back to still be one of your inside linebackers, and you use a late round pick on linebacker, right? You do you sign an undrafted free agent and see if you can develop them. You worry about it next year, the year after that, especially with someone that you found, right, that was on the street in training camp. So that's awesome to see. And the good news is I don't think he has played so well that he's going to claim a big payday from either the Bears or another team. So when you see things like that, when you see Deion Bush having a solid game, right, can you have him potentially be the strong safety? And same exact story, have him be the placeholder strong safety until you do bring someone else in. Maybe you're pairing it with Eddie Jackson. Who knows? That's a whole other conversation. But yeah, just like, can some of those guys who are those middle of the road guys who are, either veterans or on the verge of becoming more veteran-y in nature, just show you something to be back next year or or maybe even the year after that.
And that's what, with 3 games remaining, and like I keep saying, playoffs are done with. That's what you kind of want to see. Who's going to stand out and make the most out of these opportunities, these reps that are meaningful to a lot of these players that are on the fringe or maybe even management the organization has questions about. Well, one thing I do want to just mention here, Roquan Smith not being named to the Pro Bowl. I mean, I know it's been a big discussion at like these past couple of days, and um, I don't know. Like at this point, I really don't even put a lot of weight into it. I know, everyone who listens to this podcast knows that Roquan Smith is one of the best players at his position, no doubt. You don't, even if you don't watch Bears games, just look at the stats. Look at his total tackles. Look at there's a lot of ways that you can tell, but he's an impactful player, and it's just weird that he just keeps getting, I guess, disrespected. Right? I know Micah Parsons is like that last guy that kind of took his position, but and not to discredit, Micah Parsons what he's done this season, but I don't know, man. It's just tough to. I don't know. Maybe I'm just frustrated with it a little bit, but I know that he is still one of the best at his position. The Bears are very fortunate to have a guy like him. Any thoughts on Roquan Smith not being, I guess, named to the Pro Bowl?
It's because you only get so many inside linebackers, right? It's just a position that's not the most glamorous in the world, so you only have a certain number of them. And then he missed out to Micah Parsons and Bobby Wagner, right? Bobby Wagner is literally the reason, or the Seattle Seahawks defense is relevant still, but it's also a little bit. He's been there. Go back and like Pau Gasol made like one of those last All-Star games back like a couple of years in the end of his career, and it was like he's getting because he's Pau Gasol, and not really because he should be there. So like you can make an argument for that for Bobby Wagner, even though he's still doing very, very well. And this I had an argument on Twitter about this with Micah Parsons. My current problem is that also usage. Micah Parsons, especially with the injuries that have happened at Dallas, has almost been used more like outside linebacker or an edge. And that's one of the reasons that he has 12 sacks on the year compared to Roquan's 3. Roquan just doesn't blitz that much. Like I believe when I looked at it, Micah blitzed 2 times more than Roquan Smith did. And when you look at but Roquan has more tackles than he does because he's asked to sit back, read on the run, or sit back and read in coverage. He's not asked to pursue the quarterback all that often. So some of it's also just how they're used. And unfortunately, the way Micah Parsons is used just flashes more on a stat sheet. Plus, I mean, when you have the star on the side of your head and you're playing with Dak Prescott and your team is actually relevant, all of that factors in. And it's just, yeah, he keeps getting hosed. Hopefully at some point, the Bears will be good enough that he actually gets the recognition he deserves because he is one of, if not the best pure inside linebacker in the game.
I can't disagree with anything that you said there, Mason. All really good points, and Roquan Smith will get his day. I'm sure of it. He's that good of a player, and he'll continue to be. I'm not too worried. But Mason, we're going to kind of move on to the next portion of our show here, and you know what? I think what we'll do let's do one of them: X Factor or backbreaking matchup. Mason, do you have just anything in your notes where you're like, we need to get this across here? Would you rather do X Factors or the backbreaking matchup?
I kind of I can combo it if that helps you because it's kind of the same to me.
Let's do a combo here. Okay.
So
then you start it off and we'll go from there.
Tevin Jenkins that's my X Factor. That's my backbreaking matchup, right? Because if he only had 3 penalties. They stood out because they were also kind of a little early in the game. But he played really well when you go back and watch the rest of that game. I mean, he really mauled some people. And you saw some of that nastiness that he had in college resurfacing. And literally, I think it was the play after the penalty. Like, he destroyed a person. Mm-hmm. Like, he took their soul away. I can't even remember who that was off the top of my head. But that's also going to be a backbreaking matchup, whether you talk from the penalty perspective or if it's going to be from his feet and his hands. Because if he does get beat off the edge, now it's not like Seattle has great pass rushers currently with their current setup, but that's going to be pretty difficult for Justin, right? Coming off that blind side. We know that Justin's feet right now are a little skittish at times, as they should be, because he's been beat up all year. That's just a really important spot that needs to be solid this game, not just for today, but for tomorrow and the next day and the next year and the next and so on and so forth. And Kyle Waddle, love it. Yeah, literally, it could be backbreaking if Tevin Jenkins doesn't do his job.
That is very true. Hopefully, no backs break in this game on Sunday against the Seahawks. But yeah, I'll do a combo here: X Factor and back breaking matchup. But I'll kind of stick to the Seattle defense versus an offensive player, but it's going to be Carlos Dunlap. He was the one guy who did provide some pass rush for the Seattle Seahawks defense, getting 3 sacks last on Tuesday. I keep going back to Sunday. Last Tuesday against the Rams, and actually, I'm blanking on the name of the Minnesota Vikings defender. I think it was number 98. I think he had 3 sacks in the game. And it's like I don't know. It's like I think Justin Fields had. Like Tevin Jenkins had a play where he shoved 98 off, and just as he shoved him to the left, Fields was kind of turning that way also, and he ends up getting a sack. It's like it really wasn't number 98 doing like all the work there. It just was unfortunate, but you got to watch Carlos Dunlap, and I think what he might be going against, and I don't think the Bears have even made a decision at with Jermaine Ifedi or Larry Borum, who's off the COVID-19 reserve list. What are they going to do there? So he's going to be going up against that right side. That's where he primarily lines up. But you'll see him occasionally kind of switch sides a little bit. But that's who I'll be keying in on, because I don't think, Mason, this is going to be where you're going to see a bunch of points in this game. It's just not where these two offenses are at and how they've been playing all year. That's not shaping up to be a shootout in Seattle by any means. So definitely watch Carlos Dunlap and just going up against whoever's playing that right tackle position for the Bears this Sunday. And we'll kind of see how the Bears can handle that. And it's going to, Justin Fields can help with that if he gets the ball out quick and he's not hanging on looking to make plays when there's nothing there. So definitely keying in on that in this game on Sunday. But Mason, we have who has the edge, and then we'll get into the final portion. So let's kind of get right into it and start with this Bears rushing attack that has been Khalil Herbert-less. I think that's right. Versus the Seattle Seahawks rushing defense. I'll give it to you. Who do you got there?
I'm still going to go with the Bears on this. I don't ever want the limiting factor in a choice is, will the Bears just be rushing game be used? That's annoying to do that. But when you look at the Seattle defense, opponent will run about 30.6 yards per game, 30.6 attempts per game, which is pretty high. And then opponents' rushing yards per game is at 116.5. Again, pretty high. When you combine that with the fact that the Bears overall still running the ball relatively well, Dave Montgomery definitely didn't do as great in this most recent game. You can see that in terms of his yards per carry. But the flow of the game was also a little funky against the Vikings. That was more of an outlier than what you'll normally see. I could do without the Wildcat. I'm going to throw that out there again. Stop with the Wildcat. I'm done with it. You literally have a mobile quarterback and have the option to throw with that mobile quarterback. Why give it to Dave Montgomery to make a decision of, am I going to run or am I going to let someone else run? It's just silly. But anyway, Bears rushing offense.
Okay, so I have the Bears passing attack versus that Seattle Seahawks passing defense. And man, Mason, I'm kind of torn here. I think that the Seattle Seahawks defense there'll be opportunities for the Bears offense to make some of those plays, but seeing what they weren't able to do last week and then seeing what the Rams did on Tuesday, they have Cooper Kupp, and he was making the offensive scheme just works. Like there was one play, Mason, where they had Cooper Kupp run a post down the middle of the field, and one of the Seahawks linebackers was in coverage there, and it's like mismatch all day. It was a perfect throw, small window, but Stafford makes a throw, and Cooper Kupp gets into the end zone. It's like that's what I wish the Bears can do. Get those matchups, a linebacker and a wide receiver, and then being able to make the throw and execute all the entire play. We haven't seen that. We just haven't seen that all year. And Matt Nagy was calling the plays last week. I think Bill Lazor will be back for these final 3 games. Maybe actually that hasn't been confirmed yet, but I would assume that would be the case. So I just don't know if this Bears offense is up for it. So I'm going to actually give this to the Seattle Seahawks right here. Their passing defense, versus the Bears passing offense. And we also got to factor in Fields did not practice today. And it's Thursday now. We'll see what happens on Friday, but that's typically a walkthrough anyway. So you're not getting a lot of reps within the week. And that never is going to help you when it comes to being on time and in rhythm and doing all that good stuff on a game day. So I'll give it to the Seahawks on this one. We have the Bears rushing defense versus the Seattle Seahawks rushing offense. I feel like they have a multitude of running backs, and obviously, not having Collins? He didn't play last week, and you also lose Carson throughout. So they've had so many guys in and out there. But who do you got there, Mason?
So I'm going to give you in order the leaders in attempts for the Seahawks. With 108, Alex Collins. With 54, Rashad Penny. With 30. Okay, and then with 54 is Carson, tied, crazy. With 31, Russell Wilson. And then with 14, Travis Homer. Oh, sorry, and I skipped DJ Dallas because he's at 27. Do any of those names, if you remove Chris Carson because he's hurt, really scare you in any way, shape, or form? No, they have no running game, hence why their offense is broken, hence why they just look like trash. Advantage Bears.
There we go. DJ Dallas, just watching, he has a few good runs, but I would mostly agree with you, Mason. Like, it's just been so inconsistent, and you can't find that consistency when you have different running backs in all the freaking time when guys are out in injury and stuff. So again, that's a part of the reason why that offense has not been the same. And now I'll kind of end it here. It's the Bears passing defense versus the Seattle Seahawks passing offense. And look, I mean, the Bears did a really good job against the Minnesota Vikings, and I just don't know. I don't know what's wrong. I mean, there's a couple of things that are wrong, obviously, with the Seahawks, but you just kind of expect Russell Wilson to just make some of those plays. When I talked about like getting outside the pocket, he just hasn't. So until I see it, I can't give them the edge just because of Russell Wilson. Actually, I could. I honestly could, but I won't. I'll give it to the Bears passing defense in this one, and hopefully Jalen Johnson's able to come back and be a part of that secondary that did a really good job overall against Kirk Cousins and Justin Jefferson and on Monday night. So I will give it to the Bears in this one. So did that go? Let's see. You went Bears and you went Bears. And then the only one was I gave it to the Seahawks for one of them. So 3-1. See, and I think that's fair. And because the Seattle Seahawks are not a good football team. They're not. They're 5-9, and the Bears are an even worse football team. So it can go any which way. But Mason, I'll kind of throw it over to you. Do we have your segment?
I do. We have a couple of the segment stuff we can run through here. So this one, for those who haven't heard it, I change the name every time because there isn't a good one to consistently do. This one is going to be called Bearing Down or 12th on the Shelf. Get it? Because they're like 12th man in Seattle, elf on a shelf. Yeah, there you go. So what we're going to do is we're going to do offense and then defense. Sometimes I throw some special teams in there, usually in the defensive section. I'm going to give rapid fire a player on the Bears, player on the other team, in this case the Seahawks. Nick is going to give gut reaction in terms of who we pick. This time around, we're going to do, since both teams are not good, Seattle's probably going to be entering a rebuild. There were the Russ trade rumors last offseason, and I'm pretty sure they're going to come up. They've already started. I don't think he's going to be on the Seahawks next year. So they're both in rebuild mode. So your choice is to pick the player over the next 3 years. Who would you rather have as you're preparing for a rebuild, as both teams kind of are going to essentially be in? So, offense. Allen Robinson, Tyler Lockett.
Wow, I already know this segment's going to be really tough. Tyler Lockett he's already reached 1,000-yard marker. Allen Robinson's off, but that's not who Allen Robinson is. I'm taking A-Rob for the next 3 years.
Darnell Mooney, DK Metcalf.
I mean, it's hard to say, no to DK Metcalf. I don't think this is who he is either. I'll go DK Metcalf.
Damiere Byrd, Dwayne Eskridge.
he's a rookie this season, right? Dwayne Eskridge, that's the guy that you liked a lot. Yeah, no, I mean, we haven't heard much from him, but I'll take Eskridge.
Dave Montgomery, Chris Carson.
I'll take David Montgomery.
Cole Kmet, Gerald Everett.
3 years. 3 years. Keep in mind, everyone. I want to see in the chat too who you guys are taking. I will take Cole Kmet.
Tevin Jenkins, Dwayne Brown.
Man, I liked what I saw from Tevin Jenkins in just one start, man. I'm going Tevin Jenkins for the next 3 years.
James Daniels, Gabe Jackson.
Oh, Gabe Jackson. Where did he play? Wasn't US? Was it Wisconsin USC? I'm blanking on. I remember watching film on him, and I can't remember the school. Give me James Daniels.
Justin Fields, Russell Wilson.
Oh my god! The next 3 years. I don't know. I don't know, Mason. This one is next 3 years. If Russell Wilson was on this Bears team this year, what would have happened? How different would it have been? I don't know. I really don't. I'll go Justin Fields.
And lastly, Ryan Nall versus Adrian Peterson.
Wow. All right. Adrian Peterson's. I'll go Ryan Nall.
Yeah, Adrian Peterson's on the practice squad, so I picked 2 guys that are basically practice squad dudes. Yeah, in theory, Ryan Nall probably, if he's still here in a year, 2, 3, he would give you some more. I guess.
Yeah, that was good, man. That was tough. That was so tough, and I don't know what people think. Like, oh, Homer, you pick Fields over Wilson. I get it. I can understand that, but I don't know. Who would you have picked, Mason?
I would have picked Justin because I feel like Russell, he's in a different mode, right? He's and we heard this all last offseason, the reasons he wanted to move. Like, he wanted more say in personnel decisions. He wanted to grow his brand a little bit. You hear about maybe even Sierra wanting to be in a bigger city. It seems like he's shifting more to building a resume than it is about pure football. And so in that pure rebuild, and that's the thing too, if you threw Russell Wilson on this Bears team, like you were just talking about, I don't think it would have been that much better. I mean, the separation of the receiver still isn't good. The play design still isn't good. Like, all these things still aren't good. But now you're saddled with a large salary, not old, but an older quarterback. Is that really better? And so I think Justin gives you more flexibility with a rookie contract, with just the younger body. Yes, you're going to have a lot more up and down and headaches, but it's just a different outlook.
You can make the case. I think you can make the case for either one. But yeah, I agree a lot with what you just said there. But that was tough, like I said.
All right, defensive side of the ball. Oh, and as a reminder, injuries aren't part of this. I should have said that if I did in the beginning. Who cares about that? Again, 3 years. All right, Khalil Mack, Carlos Dunlap.
Khalil Mack.
Akeem Hicks, Poona Ford.
Man, Poona Ford was showing up in this game last week. Next 3 years. Akeem Hicks said he has at least 3 more years left. I will take whatever that entails in terms of whatever it could encompass that 3 years. I'll take Akeem Hicks.
Okay. Jalen Johnson, DJ Reed.
I'll take Jalen Johnson.
Thomas Graham or Sidney Jones.
That was a really great game by Thomas Graham. I need to see it. Maybe next week I could give you a better answer. I'll go. Who is it? Reed?
Sidney Jones.
Oh, Sidney Jones. Why did I hear Reed? Sidney Jones. I'll go Sidney Jones over Graham right now.
Roquan Smith, Bobby Wagner.
Next 3 years, I'm taking the younger guy in Roquan Smith. Bobby Wagner's great, but I'm taking Roquan.
Tashawn Gibson, Jamal Adams.
I'll take Jamal Adams.
Eddie Jackson, Quandre Diggs.
Next 3 years. 3 years. I'll take Eddie Jackson.
And our little special teams submission, Pat O'Donnell or Michael Dixon.
Okay, I'm going to be completely honest. I don't know much about Michael Dixon, but
he's a really good punter. I'm not going to lie. He's really good.
Okay, really good. Pat O'Donnell had a fantastic punt in the Monday night loss. But I will go with Seattle. I will go what's his name again?
Michael Dixon.
I'll go Dixon on that one then.
He's like Australian and like he does like a different kind of kicking. It's a whole thing. All right, and that is our whatever I called it. Oh yeah, bear down or 12th on the shelf.
That was really creative. I like the 12th on the shelf. That's good stuff there, Mason.
All right. So actually, I do have some over unders, not a ton, but just enough for us to fulfill the quota for today. So over under 2 passing touchdowns for Justin Fields.
That's
so we'll
tough.
set at 1.5.
I'll go under. It's not just. I don't think it's really so much Justin Fields. It's just the offense in general. So I'll go under.
You heard some of the numbers I rolled out earlier for DK Metcalf. They have not been fantastic, but over under 60 receiving yards for DK Metcalf.
It's gonna all depend on who's actually playing corner in this game for the Bears, but he just hasn't, like you put out earlier. I'll go over by like 5 yards on the 60, so 65 yards over.
Over under 40 rushing yards for Justin Fields.
I'll go. What do you have in this game? He had 35 against the Vikings. I'll go over, actually. I'll give him like 45.
Over under 0.5 receptions for Daz Newsome.
0.5. If the man can line up on sides, he maybe has a chance there. With Goodwin back, I don't know, with Robinson, I'll go over. I think he gets maybe a reception in this game.
And lastly, over under 2.5 sacks for the Seahawks.
I'll go over that number. I think there's going to be some opportunities, whether it's because of Justin Fields or just the offensive line in general, there are opportunities. So I'll go over that number.
Yeah, the Vikings had 3 in that last game. So that's kind of where I off up with that one. But yeah, that is our over-unders.
All right. Thank you so much, Mason, for both of those segments. And now we'll go over to our bold prediction and not so bold prediction. So I'll throw it to you, Mason. What do you got for both bold and not so bold?
All right. As always, I have 2 for each because I have an offense and a defense. So offense, bold prediction. Justin Fields has a higher passer rating than Russell Wilson. I am recycling this one a little bit. I did a not even bold, but insane prediction of doing this for Aaron Rodgers. Obviously, that did not happen, nor will it ever happen, at least in the near future. But I truly think that there's a chance of this one happening. It just really depends on the turnovers, because that's going to really bring down, obviously, Justin's numbers. Defensive bold prediction. Thomas Graham Jr. either gets an interception or is able, his play, like a tipped pass, will lead to one. So, he doesn't actually have to get one. I just really liked how he played. I mean, he had 3 pass breakups, and I think there's the next leading person on the Bears is it's not a great number. I don't remember what it is off the top of my head. It's not a good number. Not so bold. Cole Kmet leads the team in targets. Going to be, I think, a lot of short passes, some quick outlets, getting Cole involved. And then if they can get in the red zone, that's where they would go. And then lastly, on defense, Robert Quinn gets 1.5 sacks this game. As you actually had mentioned earlier, totally possible. The offensive line is not great. It's okay, but not great. Dwayne Brown is old, getting quite old. He's had some veteran off days this week, just simply because of that, just trying to give him some rest. Quinn can, I think, take definitely advantage of this Seahawks line.
I like that, Mason, and obviously you go above and beyond putting all the, bold and not so bold. I'll just give you one for each, and actually for the bold prediction, I had something with Thomas Graham Jr., and now I'm debating what I can change that on the fly right now. But I was going to say bold prediction, he gets another 3 pass breakups, and I don't even know if he's going to start this game. We don't even know how that's going to work with everything going on there. Maybe it's at the nickel. Maybe it could be outside corner, but I had bold prediction that he would have another 3 pass breakups, and man, that would be something for someone who's on the practice squad all year, was actually cut and then comes back on. But Well, I guess we'll leave it at that. And maybe a bold prediction. We could say, let's see, Russell Wilson. Oh, bold prediction. He didn't have any touchdowns last week. Bold prediction, doesn't have any touchdowns this week against the Bears. Bold prediction, we'll see what happens there. And then a not so bold prediction, Roquan Smith is clear as day the best linebacker on the field come Sunday. No questions asked.
All right.
And obviously Bobby Wagner's on the other side. So Roquan Smith is and shows that he's the best linebacker on the field come Sunday. All right, Mason, we are predicting the most valuable Bear on Sunday. Who is that going to be and why?
Continuing off my bold prediction, Cole Kmet. I don't know why. Just looking at how some of these linebackers play, and how they're defending other teams' tight ends, that there's a really good chance that Cole can get some looks. At the end of the day, that's he has to be that safety valve. You're not seeing a lot of separation from the receivers by any stretch of the imagination, and if he can actually get, and if I'm going to continue kind of a bold up one off my not so bold, 6 or 7 receptions and even just a touchdown in the red zone. I mean, that could be the difference in this game.
It really could. Like, I think we're predicting a pretty low scoring game come this one, but I don't want to get too far ahead of myself. My MVP is going to be Roquan Smith, and kind of building off of my not so bold prediction. I think when you have a quarterback like Russell Wilson, you want to have a good inside linebacker that can contain him inside the pocket. Maybe they'll send him on some more blitzes in this game. Be nice to see, but I think that's going to be the difference maker. Someone that could not only cover tight ends in the middle of the field, but sideline to sideline can, stop whatever horizontal passing game that the Seahawks are going to try to present, because I think the Bears are going to take away that deep passing play. And you need a linebacker that can make tackles, and it's exactly what Roquan Smith can do. And now we get to the game pick, Mason, and what everyone's been waiting for. What are you guys thinking also in the chat? Who's winning this game and why? And I'll go first. Even though I said bold prediction that Russell Wilson won't have any touchdowns, I don't really think that's going to happen. That's why it's a bold prediction. So I have it a low-scoring game. 17-14, Seattle Seahawks. They win. They're at home. And again, I think it's just more so it's really this Bears offense not being able to, one, capitalize, just not showing as much consistency. They've turned the ball over so much, Mason, in just these last 3 weeks. I think it's 10 total turnovers, which is a reason why you can't, one, sustain drives or put up points. And until the Bears can show otherwise, that they can either eliminate or just limit those turnovers, or just they take themselves out of position to win games. But I think it's a 17-14 game. We're going the Seahawks way. Mason, who do you got winning?
So actually, I'm going to have the Bears winning 17-14. Seattle coming off a really, really disappointing loss to the Rams that I believe right now, after that loss, they're now at like a 1% chance to make the playoffs. I mean, that was the game they had to have. That's a lot of emotion there. Russell seemed like he kind of had a foot out the door at the beginning of the year, and then how this year has gone has just really pushed him out that way. Not a lot for him in particular to play for. I mean, it's Russell Wilson, though. I mean, if he plays Scrabble, I'm pretty sure he's cutthroat, in anything he does. It doesn't really matter what he's doing. He always wants to win. But I mean, there was a lot of emotion left on the field in that Rams game, and how that all went down. Versus the Bears, I mean, this is just kind of how they've been, right? I mean, for the most part, it's just been this even level of ineptitude, which isn't great, but at least it's not this crashing down of ineptitude either. And so with that, it'll be easier for the Bears to peak back up than it is for the Seahawks to come from this crash down and all of a sudden bounce back in a week like this. So that's why I'm giving it to the Bears.
All right. We have same score, different results in terms of who's winning, and we'll see who actually gets this one right. Confidence meter now. Mason, what's your confidence in the Bears winning this one, or the confidence that the Seahawks will lose? Whichever way you want to take it.
I'm right, and this is kind of where I've been the last couple of weeks, unfortunately. I'm right at 5. Right split down the middle. because I mean, just like you said, I mean, we had the same score that could be the difference is a touchdown, right? It's the Bears driving and a pick six is thrown versus not, a field goal game, and that's what this is. It's just two not great teams going head to head. What coaching staff is going to put together the game plan to take advantage of the other team's downward trend that's currently going on, and what team, and this is a cliche that's thrown around a lot, but it matters. It truly does in the locker room. Which team is still in it? Which team still has the heart? Who cares? Who still wants to play? I think we saw that from the Bears defense. Like, they're still kind of playing for each other and playing to win the game, versus on the offense, I don't know that you can really say that there's as much of that connectivity there. You can go all the way back to the Jalen Johnson quote where he said, there's, and I'm paraphrasing here, but there's some people in the locker room that maybe have kind of are done, and then there's other ones that aren't. And so this game is a question mark of, well, whose locker room is not done yet?
We will see, I think, pretty early on in this game on Sunday, but I'm at a 5 as well. I think either team is capable of winning this game or as equally losing this game by not capitalizing on any opportunities that are given by both teams, because I think they're going to both be there. So, yeah, I'm at a 5, just like you, Mason, and I think that's a good way to kind of wrap up this podcast. We're thinking along the same lines, and whichever team can limit those mistakes. And the Bears had a bunch of them on Monday night. A lot of them self-inflicted, a lot where the refs kind of got in the way as well, and they end up losing a very winnable game to the Vikings. And the Seahawks have been in very similar situation this season, having only 5 wins on the season. So I'll leave it at that. Mason, any final words to kind of close out this preview podcast?
So we've left it pretty much all out there. I think it's pretty apparent where this game is headed to in terms of the evenness of it all. More than anything, just it's been a really fun year covering the Bears, even though it's not been a good year covering the Bears, if that makes any sense. So more, if anything, a thank you to everyone in the chat, all the listeners who always have all that constructive criticism, everyone who just loves the Bears and loves to hate the Bears at the same time. Big thank you to Will, who can't be here just because he's still doing daddy duties. Big thank you to Nick, obviously, also for picking up Will's slack in terms of more or less producing the show and doing all that stuff. And it's everyone else hopefully has a good holiday. If your holiday has already passed or is coming up, props to that. And hopefully everyone just enjoys time with friends, family, and stays happy, healthy, and safe.
Very well said there, Mason. Yeah, for everyone who celebrates Christmas, hope you have a fantastic holiday. You'll hear from us after the conclusion of Sunday's game between the Bears and Seahawks. But thank you, everybody who tunes in every week, who downloads the podcast, who, just, again, engages in conversations with us on Twitter. We really appreciate all of you, especially through a season like this. It's always nice to have, people like you that support us and have been for years now. So thank you so much. Enjoy the holidays, but you'll hear from us after whatever the result is for Sunday's game. But until then, Bear down, Chicago.